You can tell the value of an idea by those who support it and by those who decry it. Which brings us to The Voice. Not all people who espouse the no vote are racist, but all people who are racist espouse the no vote. We spoke with an arch conservative for this story, a former Liberal minister from days when Liberal ministers were endowed with a slightly higher IQ, and he expounded a reasonable intellectual explanation for why he would be voting no. There are arguments for it. Unfortunately, the no camp has descended into farce. It's been toxically politicised, the whole matter, Trumpified, if you like. And more on that later. Now, I'll be voting yes for The Voice, not because of some starry-eyed view that this largely symbolic gesture will change the lives of Indigenous people overnight, because it is a small step, albeit with grand symbolic value, towards recognition and reconciliation of Indigenous Australians with Australia's newcomers. And it's very simple. We're voting just for recognition in the Constitution. Parliament can debate the details and sort it out later. That's it. Why this constitutional measure and not a parliamentary one? Well, as Will Stacker on TikTok succinctly puts it,
so why are First Nations peoples so insistent that the voice needs to be enshrined in the Constitution? Quick history lesson. Back in 1973, Gough Whitlam established the National Aboriginal Consultative Committee until Malcolm Fraser got rid of that. And he replaced it with the National Aboriginal Conference until Bob Hawke got rid of that. And then there was nothing. And then Bob Hawke set up the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission until John Howard got rid of that. And then there was nothing. And then in 2011, the National Congress of Australia's First Peoples met for the first time until that was defunded and then finally gotten rid of by the Morrison government. In 2017, the Uluru Statement from the Heart was released. This took years of consultation and conversation amongst First Nations peoples, and in it they asked for a voice to be enshrined in the Constitution. Why? Because, unlike all those other laws, the Constitution can't be changed by the government. This can only be changed by a referendum. That's a vote of all Australians. So, what are we being asked to vote on in the upcoming referendum? Well, we're being asked to vote on whether to include the concept of a voice to Parliament in the Constitution. So a body to provide advice to the government on issues relating to First Nations peoples from the perspective of First Nations peoples. That's it. From there, how the voice works, so the functions and powers and composition and procedures, well, that will go into law, right? So those things can be changed along the way. But what can't be changed is the Constitution. And that means there will always have to be a voice. While it can change, it can't be taken away. And I reckon that's a good thing.
Governments and parliaments come and go. They defund Indigenous bodies. They axe them, establish their own changes with each government. But because they are not in the Constitution, this is so. The referendum means we're voting for a permanent voice, a permanent recognition, which can never be taken away except via a referendum, a vote of all Australians. In New Zealand, they don't call the treaty racist. It's not that New Zealand white people are racist because they did a treaty. The racism charge from the no camp simply is illogical. Now, we usually stick to drier subjects such as multinational tax avoidance, but there have been requests by subscribers to do something about The Voice, and frankly, if the no vote gets up, it will depict the triumph of intolerance over tolerance. It will divide this country for years to come. And let's face it, we should never stop trying for reconciliation. We should never stop hoping for a solution. Why should Australians not do everything possible to help their fellow Australians if they can, even if it's just by ticking a box at a referendum? Now look at the stats. As the Uluru Statement says, to quote it, we are the most incarcerated people on the planet. Looking at other metrics, less than half Indigenous Australians are employed. The jobless rate is 4 or 5 times higher than for white Australians. Indigenous Australians live disproportionately in remote and low socioeconomic regions. Almost half have a chronic condition, diabetes, depression, heart disease, cancer, respiratory illness. There's mortality, education outcomes, birth defects, poverty, all worse than white Australians. It is a national tragedy, and we all must do something about it. Maybe we can't fix it. Maybe we can. Maybe it will take many years to improve the situation. And there are other iterations than The Voice, which may possibly be better. Rex Patrick has just written an op-ed for Michael West Media saying that he would vote yes, but that a vote was better than a voice. While voting yes, he prefers another option, ensured parliamentary representation for Indigenous people, votes, and there's still many other options. But we have what we have on the table, The Voice. And then we also have the noise. We have the communications arm of the coalition, otherwise known as Rupert Murdoch's News Corp, undermining The Voice stealthily, assiduously, constantly undermining it for political purposes. Voice people are anti-Australian, pronounced one of Murdoch's chipmunks on Sky News recently. Another one, even the local football field will be affected. Thousands of these voice busybodies wandering around, said the Sky News commentator. Every time somebody wants to do something, they'll be involved. Who is going to send all these bureaucrats to all these places? You are. You're going to pay for it. This is just arrant nonsense. We have the voice and we have the noise. This hogwash is trotted out daily. Scare campaigns about bloated bureaucracy and industrial scale Indigenous meddling by, ironically, the government-subsidised media corporation, which is News Corp. All designed, of course, to pump up Peter Dutton, who was decided as a strategic option to oppose it, to create division, to create a contrarian position. It's no more scientific than that. It's one in, all in for this organisation. Has anybody seen much of Murdoch commentator Chris Kenny lately? The Conservative commentator. No, he's not in the Australian much. He's still on Sky News, but he's been buried. He's the News Corp white loner who actually supports The Voice. And he's been quite forthright about this. So he's been buried, put on holidays, relegated to the end of the information factory production line for his insubordination on The Voice. This is what we are up against in trying to create hope for the most disadvantaged Australians, this kind of propaganda. If you read the Uluru Statement, to quote it, this spiritual sovereignty is the basis of the ownership of the soil, or better, of sovereignty. It has never been ceded or extinguished and coexists within the sovereignty of the Crown. We stress that. It coexists with the sovereignty of the Crown. They are not taking our footy field. They are just wanting constitutional recognition of ancestral ties. To quote again from the Uluru Statement, with substantive constitutional change and structural reform, we believe this ancient sovereignty can shine through as a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood, not usurp the nationhood of other Australians. That is not the goal. It is not to take their footy field. That's all the vote is about. It's hardly racist in a toxic sense to merely recognise the people who were here 60,000 years before our 200-year stint. It's just fair. It brings hope.